everybody, to Aren't You Tired Of, the podcast where we talk about all the things we're tired of, but more importantly, what to do about it. I'm here today with my co-host,
Mark Benton. Hello.
Mark Benton. I'm Patti Johnson. And today we're getting at a topic that is pretty pervasive, and that is you are leading something. You might be in a great big job in a big business. You might be leading something in your community. You might be in a informal social group, but you're leading it and you feel, no one knows it, but you feel uncertain. You feel like you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Today, that's what we're going to get into today. That loneliness, that hidden uncertainty, and which it seems like people are feeling that way more and more. Don't you think, Mark? Isn't that such a big topic?
I think so. It's really hard right now. I don't think leadership is ever easy, but I think especially right now with all the things coming at us, I think leaders are going through it a little bit. Sure.
No matter what you're leading, it feels like that is pervasive. We have the perfect guest, Neena Newberry, and Neena is a friend of both Mark and I, but that's not why she's here. She's here because of her expertise. She has been an executive coach to senior leaders. She's a creator of award-winning leadership app, New Lens, and she's been the winner of so many awards in the community, and she's a champion for female leaders. She's just one of those people that we look up to and have always admired. So welcome, Neena.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I appreciate that warm introduction too.
What have I missed, Neena? You're doing so many things. I can't keep up with them all.
No, well, it's hard to believe that this year it's 18 years in business.
Wow.
So I left, a career at Deloitte Consulting and then started this company. But I will tell you that although I started it in 2008 and wondered what the heck have I done when the economy tanked, it's been a great ride and one that I just could not have imagined. So I just feel very privileged to do this kind of work and partner with leaders and help people be successful and really see who they are and step into it.
And you were a pro at it. And I think we became friends at at SMU. Laura Bush at that time had a women's institute. And I can remember Neena and I ended up sitting together, I think, in an auditorium or a gathering around that event. Anyway, became good friends and have stayed good friends ever since. So let's dive into this topic. Yeah. So, Neena, our topic is really around the uncertainty that we all feel. I think of it too. It gets worse. It's the Instagramming of leadership a little bit, where like you look around and everybody, everybody else knows what they're doing. Everybody else looks great. Their life seems perfect.
It feels like that.
They know what they're doing. And so I'm curious, I know you and Mark had a conversation about this, which Mark, I want you to comment on in a minute, but I feel like this is top of mind for you right now.
Yeah, it is. There's so much going on. And Mark, you and I discussed the fact that today there's so much uncertainty that's out there in the corporate world, especially. So when you look at costs shifting for organizations, and so that's resulting in restructuring, lean teams. But then you've also got technology really advancing in a very big way. And so what does that mean for my job? What does that mean for my team? There's so many different role changes as well. So, and then alongside of that, it's like we needed to get everything done yesterday. It doesn't matter what size team you have. Mm-hmm. So there's just so much pressure. But then when you look at things even more broadly and think about what's happening in the world today, the kinds of issues that are out there, whether it's a war, whether it's, something else, do I feel seen? What's happening in my country, what's happening in my state. There's just so much noise everywhere and a lot of uncertainty, including like, how much is it going to cost to fill up my gas tank, at the pump? Right. So it's just everything. And in the midst of that, it can get very, very exhausting to be a leader today. So you really have to connect to your why.
I agree, Neena, and that's well said. We've referenced a conversation that you and I've had, and I really appreciate hearing how you and Patti met, because I don't know that I knew that story where you all connected. But Neena and I actually met when I was at previous company, when I was at PepsiCo. I had heard about Neena, and she was a friend of one of the people that I was working with and for at the time, but I didn't meet her until I went, to the next company. And actually, we connected at a time when I was, as a leader, going through a lot of change and trying to navigate, new environments and complexity. And, you're right. I guess it was maybe like a month or so ago, we had a really great conversation where we were just talking in general about this leadership landscape you were just describing, and how I was saying, I feel like, and I think I made the statement, I think leaders right now, if you look online, yes, this is the key to leadership. This is how you show up. But in reality, the leaders that I work with, the leaders that I talk to, they're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
They're really exhausted. Let's
talk about that, because what I'd like to for listeners, how is it showing up? Because you all are talking about this pervasive problem with leaders, this challenge for a leader. How is it showing up? How are they dealing with it? Or do other people know they're feeling it? Are they feeling like they have to be the imposter for that leader? How is it showing up so a listener can know that's me?
Yeah.
What do you see, Neena?
Yeah. I think part of it is people, putting a smile on and showing up and wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this done? Do I have the right team to get it done? Do I even know how to do this? Because being asked to do things that really weren't part of my job description before. And may not be things that I've participated in before. And so some of it is a question of how safe does it feel? But sometimes we just don't feel like we can show up in a way where we look vulnerable. Right? Vulnerability is something that isn't always kind of rewarded and recognized within organizations. So there's kind of putting that bold face on. And, and I do think that leaders who are willing to be vulnerable, they stand out. They stand out in a big way, because there's a way to do it where vulnerability really comes across as a strength.
How do you strike that right balance? And not to get into the solve just yet, but, I think one of the things leaders struggle with is they want to be vulnerable. They want to be clear. I don't have all the answers, but there are times when things are moving very quickly. It might be a really high risk situation, and they're feeling like, I need to do something. I need to make some decisions, but I'm not quite sure what to do. How do you strike that right balance between being vulnerable and I don't have all the answers, when in fact so everybody's looking at you going, what do we do now? How do you do both of those?
Yeah. Well, even if we just go back just a little bit in time to the pandemic and what happened there were a lot of us who didn't know what we needed to do, but there was this aspect of saying, hey, when we work together, we can figure this out. So I don't know everything, but I do believe that I'm surrounded with other people who are really smart and capable too. So a bit of that acknowledgement that, you bring some things to the table and other people do too. And the power of us collaborating together and working together is pretty tremendous. So that tends to be a pretty safe way to step into it, because it really is acknowledging, what other people bring to the table.
I think too, the other thing, Neena, I'm thinking about, again, the pandemic. We don't need a case study, do we? I mean, that's like one of the greatest times of uncertainty. I think to add to that, what do we do together? Be much more short-term focused than you normally are. How far can you see? And there were times during that period we were going, I don't know if I can see through 24 hours, much less a week. So it's like, I think that's a great way. Like if you are feeling uncertain as a leader, not to get into all the solve yet, well, if you're thinking more short term, it can help you. I can see 2 steps. Like that's as far as I can, you know what I mean? Along with let's do this together. I'm wondering, Mark, what are you thinking on that?
The thing that I'm hearing in this conversation is I've been talking a lot lately, Neena, about I can't give you certainty, but I can give you some clarity. Right?
I love that.
Certainty, also I think brings this picture of I'm certain from here until, right? But we don't know that. And, and you were just talking about, that time frame in 2020 where we're like, I really don't know what's happening 24 hours from now. But around clarity, I can take one next step or give you direction or guidance or bring information to the table that can help you take one next step. And yeah, we don't want to get into solves, but I think that is what I find myself not only saying, but thinking a lot.
Yeah, thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, it really takes the overwhelm out of the situation because I don't have to solve the whole giant thing. Let me just get started here. And then after I take that step, I'll have some more information and then figure out what the next step is.
Yeah,
I love
Definitely
that.
makes it easier.
You know, Neena, when you and I chatted a little bit before the podcast today, and one of the things that you talked about that really resonated with me is that this feeling of uncertainty or the anxiety of not having all the answers, if you are the, what Mark and I call the other in the room, you don't fit what everybody else seems to be like.
Yeah.
You could be the youngest, you could be the woman, you could be the different background, you could be LGBTQ, whatever
person
it might
of color.
be, person of color.
All of that.
All of that, something that inside you're thinking, I feel different. Tell me how you think that plays into this issue of the anxiety of not having all the answers.
I'll just say this super
please.
quickly before Neena answers, because a lot of times when you are the other, the stakes are already feel high, right? So now we're amping it up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Patti, I think one of the things we talked about was my early days at Deloitte. So when I first started in consulting, I worked in strategy development, and which typically meant you're working with people who are very experienced. And in my case, it was in healthcare. So a lot of men who were much older than me. I didn't have, I do have gray hair under here, but back then I definitely didn't have any gray hair. And so just feeling intimidated by the experience, but I was also the only woman in the room. And I was also the only minority in the room. So there were multiple things kind of at play for me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like there's so much I am not bringing into the mix and feeling so much pressure. And then, what it really took for me to work through that was remembering that, hey, I've done the work. I know what I'm talking about. I've done the analysis. I may not have all the years and the gray hair, but I do know how to ask good questions.
Yeah.
I do know how to bring some different perspective. That's why I'm in the room. So just remembering why I'm in the room in the first place.
Yeah.
How did I get in here? Even if I was earlier in my career. But it was very intimidating at the beginning. So we're working on strategic plans for these large hospital systems, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I've got a lot to learn about the industry. But there was a lot of power in the perspective I could bring that was a fresher one too.
It's funny because Patti and I, we have a joke that we'll say, we may not know about everything, but we know a few things about a few things, right? And so
I
that's
love
what
it.
you were kind of saying. I may not know everything, right? But I do know a few things about a few things.
I also, Neena, you didn't say it directly, but you implied it. And that is, you didn't get into comparing yourself to people with 20 years experience. It was that wasn't the point. It was, I know what I'm doing about my work. I know what I'm here to contribute. And I'm making that assumption that you weren't playing the comparison game.
Yeah, because I would have lost.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that I was defining the game, and if you really step back and say, okay, if this is about contributing, what are the different ways that I can do it? And so maybe they're bringing all those years of experience, and look at that and how I can bring what I'm bringing and combining it with that to take it one step further. So, it worked.
Oh, for sure. Do you think that issue, if you're leading a team at any organization or whatever, if in your head you have that other tag that's just sitting there, no matter how much experience you have, how do you get past that so that it doesn't affect your judgment, your confidence? That's a big one. There's not an easy answer to that, but I'm just curious what both of you are thinking about that topic. It's a
I will. I'll tell you, I mean, this comes up all the time from people that are earlier in their careers all the way to senior executives. I mean, you would be surprised at how often it comes up. And one of the things that I have people do is to on a weekly basis, literally just jot down some of the things that they've accomplished that week. Doesn't matter how big or how small, but the thing that makes the biggest difference is to look at that accomplishment and say, what's the so what of it? Like, what really is the significance? Because it could have been something as simple as, hey, I had a meeting with somebody, but maybe that meeting really laid the groundwork for a good working relationship going forward, right? Whether you're volunteering or whether you're talking about the corporate world, right? It doesn't matter. There's a so what that goes with everything. And so there's this aspect of making it a habit to notice, right? So this is something that helps you develop a habit. And then, you know what, when you are feeling like an imposter or not feeling very confident, that's the list you pull out.
Yeah.
And you really look at the things that you're doing and the impact that they're having. And it works. It really does.
You're talking about a point. We had one of our early guests on, Ryan Halverson, who has, his own, human capital, talent practice. And he talked about with me manifesting. You didn't say it, but it's like when you jot down, here's my accomplishments. You also take it one step further and say, this is what I want and believe for myself. Not trying to get, hokey here about, the powers that be and all these things, but, just in general, stepping back and thinking about the facts. One of the things that he and I used to always talk about is, you got to run your own race. You got to run your own race. And so what I'm bringing to the table, I love what you said just a little bit ago, is that I knew what I knew and I knew what I didn't know. And I think, being curious and asking those questions and being a learner, a constant learner, I think is important, especially in these kinds of environments. Being a learner, I think it's when we start trying to, I go back to the whole certainty, implies that, I've got some answers. Clarity is still about seeking. And so I'm just, kind of ruminating that in my head a little bit.
I mean, there is so much power in clarity. There really is. And once you get clear about what's important to you and why, and you're able to connect to those things, it's amazing how quickly you can come up with strategies and direction. But one thing that I wanted to share with you just really briefly is, I remember coaching someone years ago. And so this was an executive who was contemplating whether to stay put or move to another role. And I asked her, what's the role that you're really looking for? And she, very quickly articulated what her dream job would be. And then it turns out, like, she even knew where this dream job would be. And I said, how come you haven't applied for this job? And she said, oh, no, I'm not qualified for that. And so my question to her was, how are you uniquely qualified for that role? And I just kept asking her, and what else? And what else? And she came up with this whole list, and I took notes as she was talking. And then I shared it back with her, and she was like, oh my God, I'm kind of a big deal. and she was literally like having this epiphany in the moment. But that's part of what we need to do is just ask ourselves that question. How am I actually equipped for this? What do I bring to the table? Because you just may not realize how many things there are. And then once you start articulating it, it's like, oh, wow, like I forgot about some of this stuff.
That's really, I'll just say this real quick. I think that's really important because I've also talked to a lot of people in their career that, quite frankly, and, if you're a listener and you're hearing this, hopefully this will, resonate with you. They're just going from day to day, and they really haven't stepped back and thought about the bigger picture. All of us have people come to us and they're asking for that coaching and direction. And then when you ask them, well, what do you want? What do you aspire to? And then that's where, surprisingly sometimes to me, like they haven't really given that the due diligence and thinking that they should. And so, I just wonder what both of you think about, someone that might be listening that is looking for that clarity. They're looking for it, but, I kind of think sometimes it starts with self and then you kind of go from there. But what are y'all's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think sometimes what's in the way for people is the fear of actually getting what they want.
That's true.
Versus not getting it. So I think part of it, if you can't even get yourself to do the exercise, it's like, what's really in the way here?
Yeah.
Am I worried that I won't get it? Or is it the opposite? What if I get what I'm looking for? And then how will that play out? How will my life change? Change, whether it's positive or negative, can be really hard. But I've seen both things, right? Both things in the mix. I don't know. What about you, Patti?
Well, here's what's going through my mind on this topic is, have you ever noticed how the things that come naturally to you and you're really good at, you totally underestimate?
Oh, yeah.
And I think when you were talking about your list of accomplishments and you might say, well, I had a meeting with Ben. Well, okay, maybe you had the foresight to know he's critical. I need to build that relationship. Maybe you had the intelligence to know what are the issues he cares about, and I need to have the right conversation with him to get him engaged on this topic. And I have the communication skills to build that relationship and follow up. I mean, and maybe you are that person that all that just comes easy to you. And it's like, I think that's one of the things that we underestimate things that come naturally that we're really, really good at. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Well,
we play it down.
I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah.
So that feels part of this conversation as you're sizing up. Am I ready? Am I leading where I want to? Or do I want to do something different? If everything you're good at is that's easy. That's no big deal. Then you're kind of stuck.
Well, I think this is interesting. We've covered, really, I think some good meaty topics. And one of the things I'm taking away that I think about a lot is I used to always say context matters, and I don't think we spend enough time. You don't need to spend an absorbent amount of time on it, but context matters. And I'm finding with this pace that we run and this, social media, instant clip, kind of culture, we are not taking time to really give people context, in the right way. And so I spend a lot of time framing the issue. For people. And
why it matters.
Why this matters. Why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? Because I do, but it goes back to that whole clarity. I don't know this thing, but let me frame what I know right now. And then maybe together we can figure out the next step. So I think, we've talked about a lot, but I think one of the things that, if you're a listener thinking about this is it's the step back. Let me and I just said this maybe earlier today, let's go up 30,000 feet and let's what can we see? What do we know? And let's frame this,
For sure.
Yeah. And I think that framing, just tying these 2 points together, because I think they relate to that bigger picture framing about the situation, but also what do I bring to this?
Yeah.
And those core strengths, and that's part of the framing. And sometimes we miss that part. We just focus more on the issue and the problem, and we're not necessarily thinking about, what is that perspective? What are the skills? What are the strengths? And, Patti, I was to your comment earlier, one of the things that I spend a lot of time on is helping people notice their strengths, especially the higher up you go, the more you underestimate it, or the more you think, because it's easy to me, it's easy for everybody else, and actually reverse engineering it. So I would challenge anyone who's got some core strengths, meaning whether it's you're that person who can deliver in really tough circumstances or quick turnaround, limited resources, whatever, high pressure, whatever the situation is, really getting an understanding of how are you doing it? What is your approach to doing that? What's the stuff you never skip? Like the steps that you will not skip. There's certain ones you might, but certain ones, no. If I skip that, it's going to cause a lot of other issues. So I think that the framing has got to include what you bring to the table. And if you don't really see some of those strengths, being able to reach out to other people to get some perspective and have them help you figure out what you're doing.
Do you think that you talk about that you feel like even the more senior you get, it's hard. You get more. I'm wondering what you think about the more senior you get, the less feedback you get.
Less information you also
less
get sometimes.
information. Usually if there's
feedback
a problem, you hear
yeah.
about it. But the more senior you get, now how many people have I told, look, you can't, you're not going to get the, at a girl, at a boy. It's just not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So don't think I'm not doing that great because no one, they're not going to. It's expected. You've moved your way, whatever. It's a big group.
My dad would say, you kept your job.
You can, yeah.
Right.
Well, you got promoted. You're lead. You're doing you're doing a big job.
Yeah.
That's just part of it. I'm wondering, do you think that lack of feedback and being lonely at times because you are at a senior level, is that, does those play into that at all, do you think?
No, it absolutely comes up, right? Because you don't want to sit there and be begging for feedback because
right. that doesn't have a good look, does it, Neena?
No, it doesn't. And then there are a lot of people managing up as well. So there's only certain information you're going to get because you don't necessarily hear everything you need to hear. And so this comes down to the ways that you build relationships with people and also creating the space to just reflect. Like, what am I actually noticing? How are people engaging with me? What are the kind of results that we're getting? Like, you've got to create space to think about that. Yeah. But also, I think when you invest in those relationships, people will give you unsolicited feedback. They just will, right? If you make it safe for them to do that. That
is such an interesting point. I think in one of our conversations, one of our episodes, we were both talking about great advice, kind of what do we know now? And your comment brings me back to, I heard a leader many, many years ago, talk about, the most impactful leader, they do three things really well. They demonstrate that they can be trusted, that they care about you, and that they're going to help you, and he was saying that if you can do those three things consistently, well, and in an intentional way, people will, knock down walls for you, if they know that I can trust Patti, she cares about me and, she's willing to help.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I'll go back to it again, that can bring clarity.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other way you can get clarity is two of the things you mentioned, Neena, is results. Nobody's maybe walking in and saying, wow, you really crushed that. Yeah. Well, but the results would indicate we did pretty well. And on your accomplishments, I love that habit of regularly, kind of what did I accomplish this month, this week, whatever it is. You put those two together, you have to kind of size up your own situation, right? You don't have to depend on other people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a point at which you're the one who's presenting some of that stuff, right? It doesn't mean it's like all the your focus is just on you, but the team and what have we done together and what are the roles each of us played in getting there, right? So whether you're part of the C-suite and how you all have collaborated, or if you're at a different level within the organization, each person is doing something to contribute.
Yeah.
Neena, what do you think about the old fake it till you make it concept that's out there everywhere when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, I do think there's an element of deciding how you want to show up, right? Meaning, underneath it all, I'm nervous. I'm not really sure. I'm not totally clear. So you've talked about clarity, Mark. But in this moment, this is the decision I'm going to make about how I'm going to show up, so that I can bring my best. So you can call that faking it, or is it more of like, hey, I'm going to shift my perspective about how I'm going to engage so I can actually tap into what I do bring and make a difference. Yeah.
And I think too, back to this, you Mark, you talk about, clarity and certainty. I don't know about you guys. There aren't very many decisions in life and work that are always 100% certain. Right. It's like, it is, I'm moving in that direction. We'll course correct when we get there. If it doesn't work, I can't think of many things that you're just like 100%. This is it. It won't change. I know.
Well, things aren't that simple.
That way,
things aren't that simple anymore. You know, it's more complex, and you know, as time rolls on, it just becomes more complex. And there was a kinder and gentler time.
It is not now.
It's not now.
No, it is.
It's not. Okay.
But I would say, you know, you're getting to the heart of this issue about what's really at stake here. You know, is this one of those things that's going to be permanent, right? And I like to think about one-way or two-way doors. Once I walk through this door, is there no point of no return?
Yeah.
Or, you know, is there an opportunity to take a step forward, walk through that door, iterate a bit, and then if I need to shift in a different direction or come back, you know, through, I can do that. But sometimes we just act like, oh my gosh, this is a life or death situation. There's like no recovering from this if I make a mistake.
I think that is such an excellent point. Like, you know, and I'm thinking about situations where it's like, people act like it's a one-way door. Like you go out, can't come back in, right? But I've found myself in a lot of situations like, is it really that bad? Yeah. Like,
is it really that final?
Is it final? I mean, can we like reserve the right to step back? And I actually have said that for many years in my career, like when we made a decision. And I don't know, I didn't, because wasn't thinking about the whole, you know, certainty versus clarity. But I'm like, and I'm going to reserve the right to get smarter on this.
Yeah. There's more information coming.
Yeah. I don't know it all right now.
Yeah. And I do think, you know, one of the things that really helps people work through the fear part of things is just recognizing that, you know, if you think through worst case scenario, like really map it out, like you're watching a movie playing out here. You know, what are the odds that you're really going to get to that you're not going to take the action that you need to prevent it from getting to that worst case scenario. Yeah. So, but it's helpful, right, to think through and go, okay, this might happen. But then all of a sudden you've taken uncertainty and made it more certain. By just mapping it out and saying, okay, this is what worst case would look like. And here's what I would do.
I love that. And I think too, you know, what's the expression? Not everything we think is true. And I think if you're doing that kind of scenario planning, you're realizing, well, gosh, I'm kind of making up a bunch of stuff here. That's not going to happen. You know, I want to shift here, you guys. This is a great conversation. And these last few minutes, we've talked a lot about situations and so on. I want to think about, for the listener who does have that private uncertainty, doesn't feel confident leading, what are the, you know, we've mentioned a few, but let's just focus on a few encouraging tips, things to think about for that leader, that manager. Okay. What would, Neena, what would you say are the most important that we've talked about or we haven't?
Yeah, I think, you know, a key piece of this is mindset, right? Mindset, you know, that's going to impact everything in terms of overall strategy. And sometimes we forget that there's some kind of difference that we're trying to make. There's a bigger why for us, right? A positive intent that we've got. And so starting off with that, whether you're going to say, hey, I don't know, or whether you're going to come up with some other answer, but really connecting it back to, hey, this is what we're trying to do together. This is what we're trying to solve for. And connecting things to that bigger picture, you know, what's personally meaningful for you, as well as, you know, what's going to help in that situation. So starting from that place, and that tends to dissipate a lot, right? That overall mindset. And then it gets you stepping more into, here are those strengths that I bring. Here's what we're trying to do together. Here's how we can collaborate. Yeah. So that mindset and framing is big. And I think it touches on several of the things that we've been talking about, right? But it's a way to connect it all. Yeah. And I think, you know, the other piece that I just want to say, you know, just as an overall practice, you know, I mentioned that how do you want to show up, but really integrating that into day-to-day conversation. And so what I mean by that is before these key meetings that you think are going to be challenging or conversations that you think are going to be difficult, deciding ahead of time. Right? How you want to show up and engage in that, especially if there's some people that are really tough to deal with. Right? So you deciding how you want to show up, but also anticipating what might come up. You know, a lot of times we don't really pause to think about that enough. It's like, oh, I'm just like happy that I made it here. You know, I've been running back to back.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, but what might come up? Like, even if I think it might not happen, what could come up? So even just a little bit of preparation, especially if you're an introvert, this is a bigger deal, right? Because those of us who are extroverts who process out loud and think out loud, you know, it might look a little bit different in terms of our willingness to engage in responding to something right away. But if you're an introvert, just having just a little bit of time ahead of time can be huge. So those are a couple of things that are coming to mind right off the bat.
Those are really good.
What are you thinking, Mark?
Well, you know, it's something that I mentioned, I think, at the start of our conversation, and it's that, you know, leadership is hard, you know, but I can't remember who the writer or speaker is. Maybe I don't want to misquote the individual, so I'll just say that I've always known that leadership, everything rises and falls around leadership. You know, and you could look at examples all around where in the absence of leadership, right, you know, chaos ensues, uncertainty, lack of clarity, confusion. And so I think during these times, and what I would want listeners to think about is, if you're in a position of leading, you know, no matter where it is, work, or, you know, you're in community or, you know, school or whatever, that is a position of privilege. You know, you've worked your way there, earned your way there, or you've been appointed or placed there. And so that's a place of privilege. And so you don't have to be perfect. I mean, they may expect, and they may, you know, have these expectations for you. But I think first, let's remember to be human. Yeah. You know, and I think that can take us a long way.
And Mark, I think, you know, you're reminding me of another point that I wanted to make, which is that remember that everyone else doesn't have it all figured out either. Yeah. They just don't. You know, if I had $1 for every time I have coached somebody and they're like, I keep asking this person for the answer to this question, and they either just don't respond, they disappear, or they send me on some other wild goose chase in this direction, and it's not making logical sense for me to go do the thing they're asking me to do. And how many times I'll say, how likely is it that they don't know what they should be asking you to do? Yeah. And then it's like this, oh my gosh, that hadn't even occurred to me. And especially if it's someone more senior to you. Yeah. You know, they're just giving them a pass and just assuming that they know because they're in that job. But not everybody gets promoted because of their capabilities. You know, I hate to say it, but it's true. Yeah. And so, you know, there are people in jobs for different reasons, and they're not going to have perfect strengths all across the board anyway.
That's right.
But that's a reassuring thing, but so many people fall into that trap.
And sometimes your strengths don't line up with the crisis in front of you. And that's, you know,
that's important.
You know, and I think my encouragement would be, and we've actually touched on a couple of these, and that is, think, if you are, and this is kind of typical change leader stuff, think short term. What do you know right now? And then the mindset of, we will figure it out. We've touched on that. Guys, I'm not really sure how this product is going to go in the market yet. We'll figure it out. But right now, we're going to do these things. So I think being able to put together, I don't have all the answers, but instilling confidence in others, putting those two together is the magic, I think. Because you can't be, I don't really know what we're going to do. What do y'all think? If it's a big crisis situation, those two, that feels bad. So you got to figure out, how do I put those two together and work with other people? So stop thinking you have to have all the answers, I think, and you're the only one who doesn't, I think is so important. One other thing I want to mention we haven't talked about, and that is most leaders need a safe place. Sometimes it's, you know, Neena, you or I, you're executive, you're coaching them, you're advising them. They have somebody. You have to have somebody you can talk to and say what you darn well think.
Yeah.
You aren't worried about, because a lot of times whoever you report to, they're also the person that's measuring your performance or determining what happens with your career.
Right.
So you got to keep your game face on there too. It might be a friend. I don't know. It might be a partner. Whatever it is, find where you need to go. Because a lot of times, I'm classic, right? Just talking about something sometimes and listening to yourself, like, oh, okay, this is coming together for me, or it's not as bad as I thought. You know, I just
totally agree. Whether it's executive coaching or a mentor, you know, a friend, but I would definitely say it shouldn't be someone at work.
Oh, for sure.
And I will tell you, like, after you hit a certain level within the organization, stay away from doing that, because even if you think things are confidential, whether it's someone making a face and not necessarily saying something.
I've said there are no secrets in the organization.
No,
there are no secrets.
No. But I love, like, where we're going with this aspect of, you know, I like to call it approaching things from a position of strength.
Yeah.
Whether you know or don't know, how can I show up and approach this from a position of strength? Whether it's taking that one step, whether it's reaching out to somebody, but it's not like the sky is falling. It's just, hey, I'm trying to work through this. And I know the two heads are better than one, or maybe three or four, or however many, right? But once you really focus on that aspect of continuous learning or impact, or we're growing together, we're working through this together, we're accomplishing this together, it can be really powerful.
For sure. And listeners, I hope those of you that you're thinking that I can relate to this conversation, I think one thing all three of us would say, that uncertainty, that not having all the answers is not an exception. It's probably more the rule. It's just part of it. It's part of leading a team. It's part of, you know, kind of being in a leadership role. So if you're thinking, well, I'm the only one who doesn't have the answers, you're going to feel that way again. So once you get over this hump, it'll be the next one. So our encouragement is just kind of accept that's the reality of leading and figuring out your own style to work through it. Neena, we could keep talking to you. I could continue this conversation for another hour. I know you don't have that time on your calendar. We don't either, but it's just been great. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Any closing,
Thank you.
Any closing thoughts or anything that you meant to mention that you haven't?
You know, I feel like I've mentioned it all, but I'd say just get started. Whatever one action you want to take, but the one that I would recommend starting with is just deciding, how do I want to show up?
Love it.
You know?
Yeah.
Love it. For sure.
I think that's a powerful one. But thank you for having me on as well.
Yes. And again, it's
our
Neena
pleasure.
Newberry. She's very active on LinkedIn. If you are out there and involved in so many wonderful causes in the community, and we you know, I just can't, you are the most committed person I know to making a difference in the life of others, in addition to just how smart you are and all the great work you do. So thank you, Neena, for joining us. And for all of you who are listening, we hope that this really helped you. And that this episode, you will share with your other friends who are leaders. You know that you're listening to us either on Apple or Spotify. Please leave us a review.
They can catch us on Instagram.
Yes, you can catch us on Instagram on Aren't You Tired of _social, and keep up with what we're doing. So thank you all so much for joining. Everybody have a great week and be a great leader out there in the world.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.